You've already seen this handle before. I stained it with flowers and tooled it with antler tines. Today I'll show you how to make a similar handle, but different, because every bow is unique. No two rivers are the same. You can say that about trees and wood and bows. Here's the bow we're working on today. It's made from ironwood, locally known as hophornbeam. I made it from a tree a lot like this. Actually, I made it from this tree, and I'm happy to report it's still alive. I make living bows from living trees. If that's something you enjoy, in the description of this video, there's a huge list of other bow making channels on YouTube, all worth subscribing to. Do it, or face the wrath of the bow gods. To start off, I cut a strip of leather around the width of my hand, which is also how I lay out the bow handle. If you want a number, 4 inches is a good standard. To be honest, I only used a knife to cut the leather because it makes a nice sound, and to show off the knife I forged. When no one's looking, I use scissors. They're a little more practical. Now I'm going to moisten the leather with a wet rag. This allows the leather to mold better to the handle, and also serves to case the leather so that we can tool it later. Now this is not the proper way to case leather, but it's good enough for what we're doing. So now I have the handle leather trimmed oversize, but not so much that I can't fit these binder clips over the ends. By the way, you can use leather thicker than I have, and it will probably tool better. If you have much thinner leather, you can still make a handle out of it just fine, but you may not want to tool it. 10 or 15 minutes later, I'll take off the clips and trim the leather down based on the marks left by the binder clips, as well as the scratch hole. Don't forget to mark which side will be the top of the handle, because the leather won't always fit the same way. And really try not to get obsessed with making straight lines. The leather deforms when you mold it on, and if you cut straight lines, they'll deform into weird curves. If you want straight lines when you're done, you need to let the molding tell you which curve to start with. Now I'm using an edge groover to mark the stitch lines. If you don't have one, you can use a butter knife. After that, I make the stitch holes themselves. If you don't have one of these tools, you can use a fork to mark out the holes, and an awl to push them through. Once the holes are made, I like to give a top and bottom border to the handle, again using a groover. That means we're ready to start tooling the leather. To start off, I'll use a standard edge beveler to add some contrast to the borders and make them stand out more. If you don't have a leather tooling kit, these are pretty cheap tools, but they're also easy to make at home. If you're not using your leather tooling stamps to make intricate artwork, that gives you a greater chance to make them at home. I'm more interested in textures, and I've made a lot of stamps just by hammering random things on the leather and noticing what kind of patterns and textures they make, Antler tines of different roundness are a great way to make a martelated texture. And in a minute I'll show you a pebbling stamp that I made out of a stick, just by hammering little holes into the end. So you can see there's not too much logic to it. Just do whatever you feel like, and try not to over-tool the leather, like I did in a few spots. To stain the leather, I used a few coats of Phoebing's saddle tan dye, and then to add some contrast, I used a generic gel antique. I just glop it on, applying it pretty haphazardly, trying to make sure that I fill in all the grooves. Later I'll wipe off as much as I can from the ridges, leaving the darker gel antique in the grooves. If you want to do this with more contrast, you can wipe some resist like shellac over the ridges. That way they don't take up as much antique. By the way, that's how I stained the back of the bow I'm working on today. I used saddle tan dye to color the whole bow, and then filled in the ridges with black dye. So I've had very little luck finding good rocks for flint knapping, but for what it's worth I did find this. It has a lot of mica in it, and when you scratch it, little bits of mica come off. So I brushed it with a toothbrush underwater, and I got this glittery solution that I dried, and then I ended up with these really metallic looking glitter flakes. So before this gel antique dries, I'm going to try to rub these mica flakes into the grooves and give the leather a sort of rusty metallic look befitting of an ironwood bow. Luckily I don't think I ruined it, and I'm kind of happy with how it looks, so I'll go ahead and seal everything in with shellac. And while the shellac is tacky, I'll take that opportunity to burnish the edges with my fingers. This is a piece of lamb suede for the arrow pass, and I'm adding some contact adhesive to the leather side. Next up we have to prepare the handle for gluing, so I'll put contact adhesive on the leather and on the handle. I don't want the contact adhesive to be messy around the handle area, so I'm using masking tape to denote the borders of the handle. It's more important to get the arrow pass right than have the bottom of the handle in any particular location. In other words, there's more margin for error with the placement of the bottom of the handle. So for that reason, I always put the masking tape on the top side first, exactly where I want the arrow pass, and then I just let the bottom of the handle fall where it falls. Alright, so let's get a liberal few coats of that contact adhesive on the handle and on the leather. And then after a good 15 or 20 minutes of drying, we can press fit them together and start to stitch. The threads are looking very green right now, but they'll darken up with some superglue to hold them down, and after I wax the whole handle. I also use some heat from a heat gun to melt all the wax into the handle. So there it is, folks. That was my approach to making a handle. Handles are important to me because a good bow feels like it's part of your body, and the handle is how you plug it into your brain. It's how you interact with your bow. And to the generations of bowyers, past and present, who've shared what they've learned and kept this fire burning. Vala, tak, danku, kitos, wado, sepkeika, miigwech, shiashie, shukran, mahalo, grazie, obrigado, gracias, thank you.